Good evening. Hello. 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 Is this giving any? It's giving something, right? Shavua Tov. Good evening, everybody. We're going to. I'm going to really project and hope that the microphone helps a little bit. We'll figure that out later. But before we get on with the program, we're going to begin with a quick Ma'ariv service and give up an opportunity for anyone who needs to say Kaddish and Havdalah. So you can open your red Siddur, hopefully that's right in front of you in the pew, to page 137 for the Baruch Hu, and if we could please stand for the beginning.
והוא רחום יכפר עוון ולא ישחית, והרבה להשיב הפועל ירקוך חמתו, אדוני הושיע המלך יעננו ויום קוראנו, ברכו את אדוני המבורך. Baruch Adonai Baruch Le'olam Va'ed. You may be seated. ומעביר יום ומבין לילה ומבדיל בין יום ובין לילה אדוני צבאות שמו אל חי וקיים תמיד ימלוך על לעולם ועד ברוך אתה אדוני המעריב ערבים אהבת עולם בית ישראל כי הם חיינו ויורך ימינו ובהם נגע ימם ולילה ואהבתך אל תסיר ממנו לעולם ברוך אתה אדוני אוהב עמו ישראל Shema Yisrael, Adonai Eloheinu, Adonai Echad. Ahani Adonai Elohechem Asher Hotzeti Etchem Me'eretz Mitzrayim Li'olachem Le'Elohim Ani Adonai Elohechem Adonai Elohechem Emet. Umalchuto brotzon kiblu alehem Moshe uvnei Yisrael lachanu shira b'simcha rabba v'yamru kulam mi chamocha bo'elim Adonai mi kamocha nedar b'kodesh nohorati la'osef eleh malchutecha uvanecha boker yam lifnei Moshe zeli anu v'yamru Adonai imloch li'olam v'ed v'ne'emar kifad Adonai Yaakov ugilo miyad chazak mimenu baruch atah Adonai Goal Yisrael. Ushmor tzeitenu uvoinu l'chaim oshalom e'atav yad olam baruch atah Adonai shomer amo Yisrael la'ad. Adonai Melech, Adonai Malach, Adonai Imloch, Li'olam Vo'ed, Ki Mahalachut Shelchahi, Uliyomei Atimloch B'chavod, Ki Ein Lanu Melech Ela Ata, Baruch Ata Adonai, Aha Melech B'kvado, Tamid Yimloch, Aleinu Li'olam Vo'ed, V'al Kol Ma'asav, Yitgadal, V'yigadash Mirabah, V'yom Adi Vrachi Rutei, V'yom Lich Malchut V'chaychon, V'yom Echon, V'chayder Bet Yisrael, Bagalav Zman Kariv, Yimru Amen, Yesh Miram Varach, Li'olam Omeil Mayam, Yiparak v'yishtabak v'yipar v'yitamav v'yitnaseh v'yitadav v'yitalev v'yitolal shmei kudusha brichu le'elam mikol b'kadav v'shirota tush b'chata v'nechemota dami ram yama v'imaru. Amen.
The Amidah 142 to 148, we said to ourselves, including the paragraph on page 143 that ends Shabbat.
Ose shalom bimromav, hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu, ve'ala kol Yisroel, ve'imru, imru amen, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisroel, ya'aseh shalom, shalom aleinu, ve'al kol Yisroel ve'imru, amen. Yigadav Yigadav Shemirabah, Miyamadi Vrachi Rutevi Amlik Makute Bekayakon of Yamekon of Akaito Bet Yisrael, Bagalav is Makari Vimru, Amen. Yehesh Miram Varach Leamamaya, Yiparak Vishtabak Vipar Vitramavi Nase, Vitadavi Levidalal, Shmedikudisha, Brechu, Leelami Korakadavish Rata, Tushbekat, Tavanekemata, Damiram Vimru, Amen. Tikabel Satan of the Kois, Rokadama Vahon, Divishmaya Vimru, Amen. Hesham Rabba Michamaya Vakayim Alena Vakois Vimru, Amen. Oh, says shalom, b'mamav, hu yaseh shalom, aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'imru, amen.
Aleinu on page 150.
Aleinu l'shabeach ladon hakol atet gedula liotzer breshit. Asanu kagoye waratzot v'lo samanu k'mishpachotu adama shelo sam chelkeinu kahem. V'gar aleinu k'chol hamonam v'anachnu korim u'mishtachavim u'modim lifnei melech malchei hamlachim HaKadosh Baruch Hu. V'nemar v'haya Adonai lemelech al kol haaretz bayom hahu yeh Adonai echad u'shemo
echad. Page 92, the Psalm for the Season of Repentance.
Achat she'alti me'et Adonai ota avakesh. Achat she'alti me'et Adonai ota avakesh. Shiveti bevet Adonai kol yemei chayai. Lagazot ben Noam Adonai ulevacher behechalo. Ay Lagazot ben Noam Adonai ulevacher behechalo. Lulehem antili robatuv Adonai beyeretz achayim kave el Adonai chazak v'metzli becha v'kave el Adonai.
Mourner's Kaddish. Yit Gadal v'yit Gadash Shemei Rabbah be'alma divra kirte v'yamlich malchute b'chayechon v'yamechon v'chayei d'chol Beit Yisrael ba'agala v'zman kari v'imru. Amen. Yehi Shmei Rabban Varak le'olam alamei almaya. Yit barak v'yishtabak v'yitpa'ar v'yitramam v'yitnaseh v'yitadar v'yitalei v'yitalal Shemei d'kudisha brichu. Leila min kol birkata v'shirata tushbekata v'nechemata da'amiran be'alma v'yimru. Amen. Yeh shlama rabba min shemaya v'chaim aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. Osei shalom bimromav hu ya'aseh shalom aleinu v'al kol Yisrael v'yimru. Amen. And now Havdalah. So Cantor. I'll be turning the mic over.
please rise. Why not? 1, 2. Ooh. Oh, now it's working. I think it's good now. Yeah. Eliyahu Hanavi, Eliyahu Hatishmi, Eliyahu, Eliyahu, Eliyahu Agiladi, Bimera veyamenu, Yavo Eleinu, Mashiach ben David, Mashiach ben David. הנה לישועתי יבדח ונואף חד ויהוזי וזימת אדוני ויהי לי לישועה ושבתם מים וששו ממעייני הישועה לאדוני הישועה לעמך בחטאך סלע אדוני צבאות עמנו מסגד לנו אלוהי יעקב סלע אדוני צבאות אשר ידם מודה ארבח אדוני הושיע מלך יעננו ביום קוראנו ליהודים הייתה אורה ושמחה וששון ועיקר כן תהיה לנו כוס ישועת עשו בשם אדוני יקרא לי לי לה 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 לי 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 לה 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 לי 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 לה 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 לי 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 ברוך אתה אדוני אלוהינו מלך העולם בורא פרי הגפן בורא Peri hagafen la 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam boreh minei v'samim Bore mine vesamim la 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam boreh meoreh haesh boreh meoreh haesh la 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 Baruch atah Adonai Eloheinu melech haolam hamavdil ben kodesh lechol ben or lechoshech ben Yisrael amim ben yom hashvi'i l'sheshet yemei hamaseh Baruch atah Adonai hamavdil ben kodesh lechol la 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 המבדיל בין קודש לכל חול חול חטאותינו ימחול זרענו וכספנו ירבה ירבה כחול וככוכבים בלילה זרענו וכספנו ירבה ירבה כחול וככוכבים בלילה שבוע טוב שבוע טוב Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov, Shavua tov. Those should work fine. There's something wrong with this cable.
Not working. It's not saying anything.
Oh.
Hello. Hello. Okay. Shavua Tov, everyone. I'd like to just do a very quick thought experiment that I'm pretty confident of the answer for, okay? would you please raise your hand if you love Israel? Okay. Why did I have you do that? Because I want to make sure that we all recognize that we all love Israel, and we might come, not even we might, and we're all, as I quote Monty Python, you are all also individuals. Someone please? Yes, you're all individuals. I'm not. Okay, never mind. Sorry, that's just from the, anyway. Right, we all love Israel. We all have our unique experiences, our perspectives, and we're coming into this from different places. We're going to be hearing about and talking about difficult things. So let's just keep in mind that we do so in a sacred space where we all have love for Israel and that we can love one another even if we hear something that disturbs us or we disagree with. So that's the spirit we begin with, and I know we can all rise to that occasion. I'm looking just for Wendy. Wendy's going to introduce our guest, and then we're going to get started. But while I have you here, I'll start with a few jokes. Yeah. Oh, are we? You tell me. What we say, whatever we're going to do, we're going to do. So we should go out?
Okay, I understood it. You were going to do a balance. People were going to grab
Okay.
and then come back and speaker. But
Okay, so remember your shared love of Israel as you make your way peacefully to get a snack out in the
something about with this project. We're about a 7-minute drive.
1, 2. Yeah, it's working.
But those are working good.
Yours with the Anthropos can be introduced like this lesson, so this is also.
I have the paper with the bio if you need it. Yeah.
Just need my.
Ready what? Like that? Yeah, like a rocket.
You know, it was in the 90s, and I was waiting in line. We were waiting in line to go to Yucatan,
Yeah.
and this teenage girl walked by talking about just and then all of a sudden hear about friends and faith, you know. And you're like,
Okay.
this is like that's the I can get if you reading
But I mean,
it's always the English words of it, like the words that.
it's the same for me in the different side. You know, like words that I know in Hebrew that are so similar to that their English version is similar.
Yeah.
I get totally confused.
Would you like a cup for that, or do you want to drink from the bottle?
That's great.
You good?
Yeah.
Okay. Would you like a cup, or do you want to drink from the bottle?
I'm okay with that.
Oh, okay. Just
As
making
our
sure.
guest, I will go.
Okay.
Well, I think
I like the introduction. No, but don't be afraid. Like I was.
well, not you. It's more I want them to remember that like we're. Oh no, it's okay. No, no.
Speaking about the victims, you know, like all of, like you read the book, you know, I really try to put like politics out of it, to tell the stories.
No, I think you did a great job. In fact, maybe two people. I don't think it's politically to say this is a specific government. Ever. I don't think it's political to say that all these really citizens are it's just the ones in the fringes who are impacted in life-changing ways the most. Like the whole thing about the hostages, you can't know. What we do know is that there's no trust. That nobody trusts them to do and to sacrifice anything.
I'm just going to thank you in advance because at the end you're going to have a huge crowd around you. So thank you in advance for what I know is going to be a memorable and important conversation. I'm Francine Sokol. My husband's one of the cantors tonight.
Lee. Very
Nice to
nice
meet you. Thank you. We really appreciate this. And I don't know if you know, but I mean, you probably know my husband. He's the cantor at Temple Beth Torah.
A little bit, yeah.
Yeah, but we're very close family friends of the Nutras. My son went to Schechter with those kids, and Omer's younger brother, he's from our community. He would be here, you know. So his younger brother is best friends with my younger son, and our families have been together for a long time. So seeing his face up here is very meaningful.
Yeah, we've had ever since we first got it. In October we first came out. He's very present. I mean, I was present as he would be at Midway.
Yeah, at Midway
some
it's where he
congregation,
had his
but-
bar mitzvah, and it's like 2 towns over. So
I
we
remember
had
his father, when he spoke at the day school, the week after. And he was, unbelievable.
They've been all over the world, everywhere, speaking and advocating, and they became really close with the Goldberg Polands, and they were, you saw everywhere. They split and went to both political conventions. They went to the Pope. I mean, they went anyone that would give them a platform. They're still flying everywhere. where are you? You're in Washington, you're in Israel, you know, really like the most amazing people.
No. So that when we were checked, classmates, they spoke about it. It's like the two in together to care of people, and then his father said that if he was taken, he was taken for a purpose, to care of people.
One.
Never taken with him.
Yeah,
One.
my son's story about Omer is exactly that. In high school, he was the one that's. My son went to his college Hillel and gave a speech about Omer and said Omer was the one that if he was like your older brother. When you walked into the room and he knew you needed any, he would bridge the gap. He would introduce you. He would make sure you were taken care of. And so that's, you know, it's so true about him. It's not just like what his father says. It's really like who he is. And so I hope that they're right and that he's serving that role wherever they're being held. Hopefully we can get them out. It's enough already. This is ridiculous. And it gave me hope that Israel has been so creative in getting rid of so many of the leaders lately.
Yeah.
So
We were preparing for Lebanon for all of these years. The IDF was preparing for Lebanon, and then we
Yes.
see the outcomes when, you know, we weren't preparing for Gaza. No one
Right.
thought it would happen, and we were surprised. But yeah, it's definitely like we get some breath the last few days just seeing that, you know,
Yep.
that the IDF is still capable of doing these things
Yes.
and protecting the people. Yeah.
incredible. Like, and I think the world was surprised, which is good.
Yeah. And I was surprised here that even though Hezbollah murdered so many Americans,
Yeah.
like American media is still like
Still terrible.
it's like
Still
There's no
terrible.
context here for anything.
They don't
yeah,
understand.
I mean
All they see is the narrow, and no history, no like
what's
fluency.
wrong with the more Arabs than
Yes.
Israelis?
Yes. Thousands and thousands and thousands.
It's insane.
Yeah.
There's just a tremendous amount of ignorance, overwhelming ignorance.
Hundreds of in Syria, Hezbollah was like
Yes.
wiping it out. Like,
Yeah.
Yes.
Like people in Syria are celebrating that.
Right. Well, that's what they said. The people in Syria are celebrating, and the idiots in the West.
also the people in Lebanon.
Yeah, of course. Well, of course,
Why do you
because
think
they
Israel
know.
has this great
The
intelligence?
people here
I
are.
think it really matters. It would be like we should Israel could deliver
how many siblings do you have?
And they would
Why?
still complain.
Yeah.
Yeah. It's like a mantra.
Yeah.
They're like blind marching. They're like zombies.
It goes. They're like the special unit of Golani.
It's like everything, you know, you hear about
It's like, yeah, they don't call themselves Golani because they're like, let's say it's my,
Where in Israel do you live?
in Tel Aviv. I grew up in Herzliya, which
Yeah.
is like,
Yeah, I know.
but most of my life I'm in Tel Aviv.
We love Tel Aviv.
the place Lena's gonna work.
It's usually the best. Now
Yeah.
it's not that much.
A little bit scary, but not so.
Yeah, but now I'm staying in the U.S. for like 5 months to speak with many Jewish communities.
It's so important. You can see it's very important. I mean, this crowd is already with with us, but there's I would say like a huge problem is our young people. Mostly what I notice, the young people they're the like zombies, like blindly marching for even Jewish kids. They're like on the wrong side. They're uneducated. I don't know.
I don't see that many.
I work across from Columbia and Barnard in the city, so I see every day.
Oh, that
They're crazy. They're really, really crazy.
So like, this is like media, which is
I work at the
you
Zamir
get
Carl Foundation.
200 pro-Hamas
I'm the
demonstrators
assistant director of Hamas
acting violent, and they put them on the front page. You get 3,000 Jews out of the U.S.
And then the
It
other
doesn't even get
oh, Jennifer, it was Jennifer Wong.
It's such a distortion of reality.
Bonin also.
She was in the Zamir Carl.
Yeah. That's so people I know.
Yeah, I know the name Jennifer.
And it's It's not to say there's not a problem, but it's interesting.
Maybe you just have to be used to it.
It's a problem with media here and everywhere, honestly. It's really
I just, at the end, it thinks it's going to be underwater.
just told us.
Where in Tel Aviv do you live?
Sorry?
Where in Tel Aviv?
South Tel Aviv. We live in
We rented an apartment based on
amazing.
it was great. I think we got it cheaper because
I love it.
the light bill, all the construction, everything was torn up.
My ex used to live in Yonana Bay. So yeah.
That was amazing. We had a great, it was amazing.
There was this little coffee shop on the corner. I don't know if it was back then. Yeah, just in the like that everyone sit like in the sun with like their chairs. Very
That was
nice.
I have a good friend who's medic.
What?
He's a medic.
Okay.
He's my age, 55.
You know,
I have a young face like that. His name is Tuvia Book. And he's like a tour guide, he's an educator, he's an artist, he's an author also. And he went down and he just insisted on being enlisted. He still had his boots from when he was inducted in 86. And so I sent him like new boots and but he's been part of a unit. It's a mixed unit that is they get people who are soldier to take them to 669 helicopters.
the what?
669.
Yeah.
So they get them there, and or they take them on like if it's less than he's been it's crazy. The oldest person in Gaza has a
That's beautiful.
nice.
These people like,
He's a little crazy.
and he's still there.
Yeah, what's that? Divorced is his ex-wife. He comes out, he's back on the break.
I'll just make sure my phone is quiet.
So just so you know, I'm streaming this to our congregants in Florida, and I'm happy to send you. I'll send it to you so you can use it whenever you want.
We had the book launch last week, and I didn't even, and they also, like, it was the 92Y, so of course, yeah, but after the person in charge of media and the publisher told me, okay, where are the pictures? I need to upload. I was on stage, I don't know, so.
I will give you everything, okay? Hello? Hello, hello? Okay, we gave you a little nosh. I promise you'll have another nosh afterwards. Everything will be good. I would like to welcome everyone here this evening and certainly thank our friends and clergy from Temple Beth Torah, Old Westbury Hebrew Congregation, and Shelter Rock Jewish Center for joining us this evening for the Selichot, for our speaker and also for davening Selichot. In particular, I would like to thank our clergy who've joined us tonight. We have Rabbi, the light is not good, so if I mispronounce it, please, I'm sorry. Rabbi Jack Dermer, Rabbi Michael Stanger, Cantor Scott Sokol, Cantor Yosef Katavni, am I right? Thank you, sorry. Cantor Larry Goller, thank you, thank you. No, we want to do it correctly. Lee Yaron has been a Haaretz journalist for nearly a decade and is the winner of the 2022 Yitzhak Levny Knight Award for Free Speech in Media. Her investigative reporting has resulted in the founding of state-level commissions and substantial changes to Israeli policy and law. She is an elected member representative of the Executive Committee of the Union of Israeli Journalists and the founder of Green Idea, the Middle East's first journalists training program dedicated to climate coverage. Ms. Yaron has also written and directed acclaimed theater productions which bring attention to marginalized communities both in Israel and throughout the Middle East. Born in Tel Aviv, Ms. Yaron splits her time between her native city and New York. Her new book, 10-7, 100 Human Stories, that will be discussed tonight, is a definitive account of the October 7th attacks through the stories of its victims and the communities they called home. The book is already a bestseller in French, where the first edition was recently published. In the coming months, the book will be released in many other languages, including German, Russian, and Romanian. The Jerusalem Post wrote, 10-7 is the most expansive account yet of the day, capturing the diversity of the victims and survivors, and by extension of Israel as a whole. The forward reviewed, Yaron took on a great challenge, yet succeeded. Her book is vital for Jews, non-Jews, for Israelis and Palestinians. Adam Gopnik of The New Yorker called it a masterpiece of journalism and of what can only be called humanism. And my personal review, it is a must-read. Beautifully written, it will touch your very soul. It will propel you to pray on this Selichot and throughout the high holidays, not only for ourselves and our families, but for peace, for justice, for understanding, and for forgiveness for all. I do want to thank the Jewish Book Council for making it possible for us to bring Ms. Yaron here tonight. And I now turn over the microphone to Ms. Yaron and Rabbi Joshua Ben Gideon.
And thank you, Wendy, and the committee for bringing Lee to us. It's such a new book. I found out about it only when Wendy told us that we were going to be lucky to have you here. And we are truly blessed and lucky to have you with us tonight. This work is so personal in that you preserve the humanity and the individuality of the people you speak about. Can you speak about that experience, about what it took from you, what you gained from it, and how challenging that was?
Of course, thank you, first of all, everyone, for having me tonight. It's a real pleasure to be with you. And thank you, Wendy, for this beautiful introduction. Thank you, Rabbi. Maybe I'll start with explaining a bit about the book before we get to the personal, because, even now it's difficult for me sometimes to speak about it. We need to start with the facts. I'm still...
Well, then let me start you back then.
Okay.
It's a very good point. How did it come about? Where did the idea come from, which must have been quite some time ago, and to come together so quickly?
Right.
How did it happen?
I started writing in the end of October, very much while I was still overwhelmed with grief, with anger, with sorrow. And I really felt like I almost needed to do something for these victims. I wanted to save them somehow. We're speaking about Selichot, and the first thing that I told Wendy when she wrote me is that it was my way to ask the victims for my slicha. I think a lot of Israelis feel this way, like we need to apologize to them. And the only thing I could do is what I always did, which is to write. I've been a journalist with the Arts for almost a decade now, and I've always been focused in human stories and the people on the margins of Israeli society, if it's asylum seekers, if it's victims of sexual violence, if it's women's rights, the LGBTQ community. And time and again, I've seen how some politicians are not just, shaping the policies that affect these people's lives, but also retell and mistell their stories. And I came to understand that if I truly want to represent a political reality, I need to tell the story from the bottom up, that the real story lies with the real people. And in many ways, I feel that since October 8th, we've been experiencing the same thing, right? We've been flooded with information and disinformation and misinformation about Israel and Palestine. But if we think about it, we're hearing all the time from the people in power, if it's the Israeli government, if it's the terror organization of Hamas, and we don't hear enough from the real people, from the civilians that have suffered it. So this book is really my attempt to reclaim the story of 10/7 from the people who created it and return it to the people who suffered from it, to go beyond the statistics, beyond political agendas, and just give my readers a ground-level view of the conflict of that day of 10/7 and the history before it, from the hearts and from the homes of the people that lived and died on the Gaza border.
And when was it published in Israel?
It's not yet published in Israel. I did the opposite way, because very early on I felt like in Israel we live these stories. We're all in this. I started the book with the concept of Shiva that I don't need to explain to you, but to our not-Jewish readers. In many ways, we're all in this 1 year of Shiva, mourning one loved one after another. And we're working now on the Hebrew version, and I do feel like there will be a place for that in Hebrew, but mostly that people in the world needed to hear that. And it's amazing, to visit Jewish communities. Like Wendy said in French, I'm now gonna go to Germany, to the Netherlands, and you meet these people and you see how all of us are feeling this feeling of isolation, of fear, of like being not understood, of everyone are mourning, and not just us in Israel, but all the Jewish community. And it gave me a lot of strength, maybe I can answer what you asked before about how it was to write it. It was extremely painful, especially 2 months into writing. I lost one of my dearest friends, Gal Eisenkot, that the book is dedicated to. Gal was the son of Gadi Eisenkot, that was the chief of the IDF. But he was a student. He wanted to be a doctor. He didn't choose like this path of military, but when October 7th happened, he was on his uniforms in a few hours going there, and he was killed in the middle of a mission to save hostages. And I got the call announcing Skal's death in the middle of an interview with a mother that lost her son and her daughter-in-law and is now raising their 2 little daughters. And when I started writing, I had this, perception that I'll be able to still keep this boundary as a journalist between me and, my personal life and writing this book. And it very much collapsed, and I felt like I'm among these people, I'm documenting. But in many other ways, it gave me strength because it gave me a mission. And I was able to be the voice of these victims and families that were silenced and couldn't tell their stories for themselves. So it also gave me hope.
So there are just such a variety of stories that you tell, some that maybe were, if not expected at least, fell within what you thought would be this normal kind of story or connected to a community you understood. Tell us about a surprising story or something that taught you something you didn't know about Israel or about a population in Israel.
Right. I mean, it's always hard to choose because this book is telling the stories of 100 people, mothers, fathers, children, and it's as diverse as the Israeli society. And it's important to say, it's not a book about their death. It's not like we're only reading about their last moments, but I was truly trying to investigate their lives and their communities and their families' histories, sometimes going back 2 and 3 generations to when the conflict started. So when you read the stories, you kind of understand what is Israel and what is the Israeli-Palestinian conflict when the personal stories are woven together with the larger political picture. The first very surprising story I'm thinking about is of the Ukrainian refugees in Israel. There's a community of about 50,000 Ukrainian refugees that fled to Israel after Putin's aggression and after February of 2022. As Jews always saw in Israel a place of refuge. And 1.5 years later, on October of 2023, they need to flee their house again, this time from Hamas rockets. And I'm following this amazing story of a young man called Eitan. He's 15 years old, is an orphan from Odessa. And on that day of the 24th of February 2022, the rabbi of these kids in the orphanage is one of the first to understand what's happening and to organize a bus. And they're driving for 20 hours to the Romanian border, fleeing to this abandoned hotel. And after a while, is making the journey to Israel, living in this community in Ashkelon. I'm sure many of you visited Ashkelon. There's this beautiful white beach that reminds them of home, of Odessa. And he's feeling, like he found a community. Sometimes he's seeing the Iron Dome, and he's saying, well, here there are rockets, but I'm saved. I know the IDF will protect me. And on the day of 10/7, his new home suffers a direct hit from a Hamas rocket. Eitan was saved. He ran away before, luckily, but he's starting his life in the 3rd time in 2 years. And he's asking me this question of, I'm only 15 years old. I've been to 2 wars. Do you have an idea where's the safest place for a Jewish kid? Because I just want to go to school. I just want to live. And this question stayed with me. Maybe one last story is the story of Moshe Riedler. It was published this week in Tablet. They published this chapter, if some of you heard about it already. But he was the oldest victim of 10/7. And I start Moshe's story in the holiday of Simchat Torah in the year of 1941, when Moshe and his family are deported from their home on a little town called Herza on the border between Romania and Ukraine by the Romanian allies of the Nazis. And he's separated from his family. His mother is murdered. He's taken to the ghetto, survived it somehow. And as a young man, a young Holocaust survivor, when Israel is founded, he's making aliyah to Israel. And he has this sense of justice in him. So he takes a job at the police. And he becomes a little bit of a famous police officer that all the newspapers of the 60s are writing about him because he's catching all the pimps and the drug dealers, like making justice in Tel Aviv. And when he retires, he moves to live near his daughter in this small kibbutz named Cholit, near the Gaza border. Becomes this grandfather of the kibbutz. He's already 92. And then on the same day of Simchat Torah, that was 10/7, Hamas terrorists murder him in his bed, in his home, exactly 82 years from the day the Nazis deported him. And I mean, it's unbelievable. I found it out in the middle of interviewing his family. They didn't even know it in the beginning, the date that he was deported, and they got a letter from some survivor that was his neighbor in Herza, and she told the family, we were deported the same day, and they called me, and I said, no, it can't be. And I searched all of their e-score books, and maybe we can speak about that because this book is in many ways following the tradition of the e-score books. And I found like three evidence for that, and it was the same day. So it was just this crazy story of everything we've been through in the last century, in the story of one man.
Yeah, that was. Seems like they should make a TV show or a movie about him. Can you speak about the experience of sitting with survivors or the relatives of people who were murdered? And what did it feel like? And what was your approach? How did you engage in that conversation that must have been so fraught with emotion?
There's one thing that I kept seeing in all of these conversations that are obviously, beyond painful, and it's people you start speaking with as a source or someone you're interviewing and quickly becomes friends. And we're with most of this 100 families, I'm still in touch, and they're brave enough to share their stories with me in their hardest moments. So I tried to support them as much as I could. And honestly, these interviews were a source of comfort for a lot of them, because like it was for me, the only thing they could do for their loved ones is to make them remembered, and remembered for their lives and not for their last moments, and to make the history and Israel understood better through their stories. So I'm happy that I could at least do that for them. But something interesting that I heard time and again from these families is this feeling that 10/7 wasn't just part of Israeli history. It was truly part of Jewish history. And when the news were, quickly unfolding, I realized that my job will be to go deeper and put this day in the right context. It's like this fence broke on October 7th, but it wasn't just the physical barrier. It was the dream of generations of like this wound of pogroms, of persecutions that was reopened. And to be honest, I know it from my family. My surname from my mother's side is Adato, which is 1496, which is in Hebrew Gematria, 4 letters, which is the year that my family was deported from Portugal. And for 500 years, my family was wandering between Italy and Turkey and then Israel. But we kept this name, and my grandfather told it to me and every generation because we wanted to remember our injustice. And my father's side were Holocaust survivors from Romania and Russia, people that, went through so much pain. And I remember my grandparents struggling in Israel. They came in an older age. It was difficult for them with the language. It was difficult to adjust to the culture. They lived in poverty, but they had this dream that their children and their grandchildren will live in safety. And that day, that dream was shattered, and you hear it from families of victims that came from Arab countries, from the Soviet Union, from Europe. I'll give an example of the story of Shachar Tzemach. Shachar Tzemach was this amazing peace activist from Kibbutz Be'eri, a kibbutz that 10% of the residents were murdered or kidnapped on 10/7. And Shachar was giving testimonies to the organization Breaking the Silence and giving tours in Hebron about the occupation, really, working with Palestinians to find a solution. But on that morning, when all of his kibbutz, his little kids are under this invasion of terrorists, he was one of the first to take a weapon and go and defend people and fight when the IDF wasn't there. And he was defending the clinic where some of the doctors and paramedics were trying to save people. And he was calling the IDF again and again, and no one came, and he stood there until he had no bullets. And when the terrorists came, he put his hands up. And he said, "Please, I'm not your enemy, don't shoot me." And obviously they did. And when I speak with Yaron, with Shachar's father, is obviously speaking about their horrible pain of their son, but is also speaking about his own mother, Carmela Tzemach. And Carmela Tzemach was a 13-year-old girl when she lived and survived the Farhud pogrom in Iraq, in Baghdad, in 1941. She saw 200 of her Arab neighbors murdering their Jewish neighbors. And she escaped from Baghdad and came to Israel and was one of the people that founded and built this kibbutzim, thinking of her children, thinking of her grandchildren, wanting safety. And Yaron is telling me, what would she say if she will know how her grandchild finished his life in the kibbutz she founded? And that's something, I think all of us Israelis and Jews are asking ourselves now.
Yeah, I think it was Rabbi Daniel Hartman. He said that Israel didn't exist for those 2 days there for those people. Because this is exactly what Israel is here to defend Jews from. Well, we have, of course, some contentious issues that are being debated and argued about. One, especially in Israel, is approaching October 7th and the memorialization. It's not, yeah, approaching, there, here we go. I was working really hard, I just wasn't getting there. approaching October 7th and memorialization. And your husband wrote beautifully an afterword about the path, or taking note of the difference between how we remember, how a family remembers, how people remember, versus how we memorialize, how it becomes a part of a larger story. And that's always at risk, right? Because when it becomes a part of a larger story, then we lose the individual too often. So, and also as an Israeli who has been so immersed in these stories, what do you think is appropriate for Israel to do this year?
Honestly, I think that the best memorialization we can do is what we're doing here today. You know, you're all people from different places that are spending their time and effort to come here, to hear the stories of people you never met. I think this is really honoring them. And I think it's part of what we started speaking about. We are all part this night of this old tradition of the Iskor books, that since the Middle Ages, Jewish communities that suffered pogroms and persecutions would collect the names and the stories of the communities and people that were lost. And every year they would read them in the synagogue aloud to remember. And I think, you know, that's what we're doing today. I'm speaking again from the personal perspective because, you know, that's how you feel it the best. After Gal's death, I felt like it's not only that I lost my friend, but that he became this political symbol after, that his death was used by so many politicians from so many places, and I couldn't recognize anymore Gal in these articles. I couldn't recognize his individuality, the unique, amazing person he was. And what I think literature allows us, that as a journalist, media never allowed me, is really to preserve the humanity of the people, to preserve their unique personality, to really keep them alive, at least on paper. And that's what I try to do in the book for the victims, that, you know, what we couldn't do for Gal. And for me, that's the best way to remember.
And let me give an easier or lighter question, and then we'll get to the second harder question. So your friend and colleague Amir Tibon has a book that's being published this week as well. Amir is also a reporter and was living on Nachalos. Not to ruin the story, his father's a retired general who basically with his wife drove down and rescued the family on October 7th. You need to read the book, you need to hear him speak. This past week he spoke in New York City at the Stryker Center. And I was able to watch some on video, and he also mentioned something that you mentioned, which is the speech of Moshe Dayan about Roi back in 1956. How did that eulogy of this 21-year-old in 1956 come to be a part of the story, and how did
That's a good question. In my book, it's part of the chapter about Netiv HaSara. And like I said, I went really, really deeply back in this research, and I found this unbelievable character of Tzvi Gershoni. Tzvi Gershoni is the man that stood to the right of Moshe Dayan during this funeral, and he's there in all the pictures, but nobody really knows who he is. And he was this Knesset member from the Avodah, from the Labor Party, and he worked with the chickens.
You describe him, he's like a real problem solver. He gets things done. He's more pragmatic, wants just to solve things for people.
He was there in the 48 war in the Negev. He was giving the reports to Ben Gurion about them hiding underground. But he was like this, a real mensch. Like he would go from the Knesset to treat the chicken, go back. He said when he was started his role in the Knesset that I swear I'll do my part and I'll go back to the chickens where I belong. And really a man that, represent old Israel in a way. And after he's doing all of that, he's one of the founders of this kibbutz, of Kibbutz Nir Oz. And he gets a heart attack in the middle of a Knesset committee, a finance Knesset committee. Before he dies, he says, well, the most important thing for me is not everything I've done in the Knesset, but that my kids will stay kibbutznikim. So, of course, what happens is that his kids are leaving the kibbutz and are moving to this moshav Netiv Asara. And I will not tell the whole story, but we're following the grandchildren of this Tzvi Gershoni, and the story of these three families that are very different from each other. One family is the Tassa family. They are really loyal supporters of Netanyahu. The mother, Sabine Tassa, spent October 6th reading the biography of Netanyahu. She came from France to Israel when she was younger and really, really believing that Netanyahu is the only one that can give security. And then there's the kids and grandchildren of Tzvi Gershoni that are protesting against Netanyahu every Shabbat. And they live, next door. There's another family, and they're all falling victim to Hamas terrorists that day in different horrible ways. But I think it gives a lot to understand where this Tzvi Gershoni, the grandfather, was a man that was a Zionist from the former Soviet Union that comes, and his dream is to be like Moshe Dayan, to be this tzabar, to be this kibbutznik, and Netiv Asara is a moshav that was founded in Sinai in the beginning, when the Israeli government called families and said, well, we have this new land, go and start new moshavim there. And after Israel is signing the peace agreement with Egypt, Netiv Asara is of course given back with the rest of Sinai, and all of these families decide together that they want to build a new moshav with the same name. And Shoshana Tassa, the grandmother, is standing on this hill and seeing the Zikim beach and saying, okay, here, we're going to build it here. And that's how they started. And then, Shoshana's grandchild will be murdered in this Zikim beach, so it's just, it connects to what we just spoke about. You see the generations of trauma.
And so his eulogy from 1956, you think it speaks to this moment as well? Is that?
Yeah, it speaks about, there's the difference between what Moshe Dayan said and what Herzog said, the current president, when on October 8th. Because in the original eulogy, Moshe Dayan spoke about the pain of Israelis and the pain of Palestinians. And he said, I don't blame the Palestinians, but I blame us. And that, that three sentences were cut even then in 56 from his speech when he read it in the radio, but he said it. And of course, when Herzog gave his speech on October 8th, he quoted some parts of this eulogy, not these lines. And he used a very different language. And it's kind of interesting to see how, in this decades and decades, we are not even, we're more far away from peace or from understanding each other than we were back then. I'm part of the Israeli young generation, and not a lot of people know it, but 50% of us Israelis are 30 years old or younger. And 30 years old means that we never lived in a time of an hope for peace. I was born with the murder of Yitzhak Rabin, and with Yitzhak Rabin, the murder of, the Oslo Accords, of the hope for a change. And I think it's important to understand for so many of us, that are now fighting this war, the young people, that we just didn't know another reality.
Yeah. And just to be clear, what Moshe Dayan was saying he blamed Israelis for was complacency, was for dreaming something could be, not for dreaming, but for, I think he said it, for being blinded by hope and ignoring the threat that was right in front of them. So he wasn't blaming.
No, he said that, but he was also blaming, he had a few harder lines but that belongs in 56.
And so, that we have here in our local community a very heightened awareness of hostages in Israel because of Omer Nutra, who is still there in Gaza. And you have been with families who have lost hostages. You've been with families who've gotten hostages back. Can you tell us about that experience and what you've learned from being so intimately involved with it, and what your hopes are or what you think might be possible with regards to hostages?
Yes, I've interviewed some of the hostages that came back in the November deal. And in the book, I'm mostly focusing on this amazing story of a mother, her daughter, and a friend of the daughter that came to their house on October 6th for this pajamas party that turned out to be 2 months of pajamas party in Gaza. The mother is Raya Rotem. She's like this 54 years old, strong single mom. That by coincidence, there's this crazy story that her grandfather was as well a hostage in Gaza in 48 by the Egyptian army, and was also released, because then Gaza was part of Egypt, and was released in a deal and came back. And Raya never spoke with her grandfather about it. That's just a little detail. But Raya has one daughter. Her name is Hila. She's this energetic, funny, beautiful kid. And Hila's best friend is Emily Hunt, that you might have heard about. This 8 years old blonde girl, the daughter of Thomas, that was a volunteer that came to Israel in the 70s and fell in love and stayed. The interviews with them were very difficult, and I think it was the small details of understanding how it's like to be hostage, and they were there only 2 months, that just stayed me, from like the first moments of the terrorists are entering their homes, they're taking them in their pajamas from bed, and the first thing they do with them in Gaza is to cover the little girls from head to toe, because they're telling them men can't see any woman's flesh, we need to cover you. And then for days, they're dressing them with full hijab, and they're moving them in the night between one family's home to another because they can't decide. And in the end, they turn up to, they put them in this tiny, tiny room with a broken window, 5 mattresses on the floor. They wore 5 of them, Hila, Raya, Emily, with no Argamani, that was brought back, and Itai Svirsky that was killed. And they're there guarded 24/7 by these 5 Hamas terrorists. And they don't have food. They have 1 pita to share for a day, or 2 cucumbers, or 1 orange. And they have a little amount of water, so they're not drinking during the day. They wait for the night because they don't want to waste it and be too thirsty after. And they have this mechanism of not forgetting what day it is. So every day they wake up, all 5 of them would say, what's the date? What's the day of the week? So if someone forgets, the others can remind them. They all suffer from fleas and lice, but they don't tell the Hamas terrorists because they're afraid they're gonna cut their hair or take their clothes if they'll discover. So, even these little things of just suffering. And one of the most horrible things is that the Hamas terrorists would take the little girls alone to a different room. And then they sometimes would just ask them to stare and look at them, and would hold the weapon against them and just sit. Or in other times, the terrorists would ask the girls to repeat sentences in Arabic that they didn't understood. And after that, they told them, oh, well, congratulations, you're converted to Islam. And the girls wouldn't understand and would cry. And maybe the most, heartbreaking thing is that for all of this time, they had no TV, no radio. They had no idea if their families were alive or not. And they were, tortured by it. And they didn't know if people know they're hostages, if people are protesting or doing anything for them. And in the same time, this chapter I'm following, what they're going through in Gaza, but in the same time, what their families been through in, not in Be'eri, but in the hotel near the Dead Sea that they were evacuated to. And that's amazing because it wasn't known before. The 2 families were told that the girls were dead. It wasn't just the Han family. The 2 families, someone misidentified 2 other little girls from this kibbutz with Hila and Emily. So the families were mourning for a month until the IDF told them we had a mistake, So yeah, what they're saying all the time and what I'm thinking is this was only 2 months and they're really struggling, to recover and to go back to their lives. And we have hostages there still, 100 of them, for 12 months. We were all broken with the news about Hirsch and the other 5 hostages, and what do we know? Maybe while we're speaking, there are more hostages that are being executed. Maybe, how many of them are in these dark tunnels with no light, with no food. And we spoke about it a little bit before. For me, and I think for so many Israelis, we are a country of a mandatory military service, and that means that we have a very, very clear social contract that says we don't leave anyone behind. This is the contract that allows every parent to send their kids to the army. And I'm really worried what will happen and what will be left of Israeli identity if we don't have the hostages back, if we break this contract. So I think for a lot of Israelis, it's not about the price we will pay if we'll have a deal, which the price is high, no doubt. But if we can stand the price that we will pay as a society if we wouldn't bring them back.
And being Israeli, do you see things changing? Is there momentum in any particular direction for change? When I was in Israel, Pesach of 2023 with our family, and I had a very unique experience of being in this way, being with our family, with a part of our family in Zichron Yaakov, with two guests, one of whom very proud that his birth certificate said Palestine because he was born before 1948. That's how Israeli he is. And both of these, he and another gentleman, were so frustrated back then. They were telling us, stop giving money to Israel. Americans should stop giving money to Israel. It's the only way it's going to get something to change, the only way it's going to get something to stop. I don't think they meant it literally, and I've never heard that before from Israelis who served, who were such a central part of things in the society and so dedicated to the country. And I think they meant it really out of frustration. But October 7th clearly had a huge impact on that and has hit everyone. So now, as we're approaching a year later, what changes do you see in society, or what do you feel on the ground? How do you see it as what might be coming in the future?
It's a very good question. I mean, I think for a lot of Israelis, it's really difficult to speak about tomorrow, to speak about any future when, we still have rockets overhead, when we have this new front now with Lebanon. And it's hard to have, to have empathy, to have sympathy when you're still burying your dead, when you're still waiting for the hostages. But some effect of it we can see in the numbers right now. I mean, if you looked at the data 10 years ago, a decade ago, 60% of Israelis believed in a two-state solution. If you look at the numbers 1 month before October 7th, it was 50% of the Israelis that believed in peace. And when you look at it now, it's 25 to 35% of the Israelis. And by the way, it's the same thing with the Palestinians. 2010, their poll said that 58% of them believe in peace. And a few days before the war, before the massacre, there was a survey, and it was 28% of Palestinians. So people lost hope in many ways. And you also need to understand that Hamas, in many ways, murdered the leaders of the Israeli peace community. They murdered what was left of the peace community. I mean, I checked their voting rate in this kibbutzim. 94% of them were voting to left or central parties that were doing everything for a two-state solution. I mean, if it was up to them, Netanyahu, he wasn't the prime minister, he wasn't even elected to the Knesset. So when I speak with these families, there's obviously a variety of responses, but a lot of them feel like we lost our loved ones, and we also lost everything we believed in. We feel foolish. Of course, there's other families that are, fighting today more than ever and saying we don't want revenge. We want to find a solution. We're done, with all of this military approach that Netanyahu, for his two decades in power, is telling us we can't solve this conflict. They're saying we refuse to believe it. After we pay the heaviest price, we want to try diplomacy. So I think it's a bit early to say, but when we're speaking about the future, there's a subject that everyone is ignoring that is very important for me to raise, and that's the gender aspect. I mean, if you think about it, how many women there are in the Israeli war cabinet? None. How many are there in the, in leading roles in the IDF? barely any. You know, how many are there in the Hamas leadership? That's a joke. But in both sides of this conflict, we have an absolutely no women in leadership roles. And when I'm thinking who were the only people that tried to prevent Israel from this attack, I'm thinking about these young women that have done this job called tatzpitaniyot, or spotters. It's a job that is given only to Israeli young women soldiers. It doesn't have in Hebrew even a male word for it. It's only, tatzpitaniyot is only the female word. And their job was to sit for hours and hours and look at the border, look at the desert, and report to their commanders if they see any suspected activity. And weeks and months before the attack, they spoke up, a few of them, and said, we're seeing something is unusual. But they were told, girls, you're the eyes, you're not the brain. And they were ignored. 16 of them were murdered on the morning of 10/7, and 6 were taken hostage. Most of them are still there. You know, and then I'm thinking not only about them, I'm thinking about what happened on October 4th. On October 4th was a huge peace march of Israeli and Palestinian women walking together from Jerusalem to the Dead Sea. It's two organizations, Women Wage Peace from the Israeli side and Women of the Sun from the Palestinian side. They are mostly mothers, and they signed this mother's call. And they're saying, look, we've been through a lot, but as mothers, we have more that unites us than separates us. And we ask our leaders to go back to the negotiation table and try to find a solution, because they're not even speaking. And they had this, you know, thousands of women, and these speeches about peace. And then 3 days later, the co-founder of Women Wage Peace, Vivian Silver, was murdered in her home in Be'eri, and 3 other members of Women Wage Peace were also murdered. And I just can't, you know, stop thinking about what would happen if we listen to this tatzpitaniyot. What happened if we listen to this, you know, women, these mothers, asking us to you know, to think about our children, to protect our sons before. And how come that everyone are now speaking about the future of Gaza and what will be the next leadership in Israel, but no one is speaking about the critical need to have women, you know, also making decisions. So I don't know what will happen, but I know we need that.
Amen, for sure. Yeah. And that is a changing face of Israel, which is there are more and more young women who are serving in increasingly what's considered traditionally important roles in Tzahal, in combat places, and we've seen a number of women who are combat medics who have been severely injured or been killed, sadly, in action, of course. And there's an organization that anyone who's on the mission got to visit, which is called Achim L'Chaim, Brothers for Life, which is, you know, works with soldiers who've been catastrophically injured, and now they have to establish now a kind of a sister organization for Achayot, right, for the sisters who have been in the same place, and which is, of course, horrible, but is also a sign that there are, from the ground up, women who are ascending to these to higher and higher roles. So hopefully, if not tomorrow, then someday. But let's turn towards just one last question of slicha, which you mentioned that this book is your form of slicha, and it's a thing that all Israelis need to do, but let's think about this for all Jews around the world and for all of us in this room. As we are approaching Rosh Hashanah and Yom Kippur, and we're thinking about our relationship with Israel, we're thinking about our responsibilities. What's the question you think we need to be asking ourselves as we're pondering these questions on these Aseret Yemei Tshuva?
I can speak for everyone. I can share for myself that, we're mourning this kind of Shiva that no one gave us the orders how to mourn. We know how to mourn one person. We don't know how to mourn if you're a family that lost a father, a mother, a friend. How do you mourn so many people? How do you mourn the hostages? How do you mourn full communities that were destroyed? I think in Israel we're trapped in these questions, and I write about it in the introduction, and also about this. We can't say shalom, any word from this shoresh during the days of the Shiva. And it's the question I ask myself is how can we break this cycle if we're always mourning, someone in the Middle East? How can we search for shalom again? How can we rise? How can we, continue life while mourning when the Shiva is never ending? And I'm still searching for this answer. I can tell you that more than ever, I feel like Israelis are feeling very alone in this time. We feel like, the world is not understanding us, and we feel more than ever that we need the support. I'm with this book, even though it's coming out in so many languages, I'm staying here in the US for a few good months to speak with Jewish communities like yourself and really, tell these stories, send this message, because we feel like the American Jewish community is so important and our best ally. So I'm sure the people that are here and chose to come and chose to listen are the people that are already doing and already care. And, I can only ask you to, keep telling these stories, keep remembering, and thank you for, sharing this very heavy grief with us.
So maybe we can ask ourselves how we can go to Israel, how we can show support for Israel, how we can make Israelis feel held and supported. Let's give appreciation to Lee for a beautiful presentation.
Thank you.
I do think this book is going to become a part of our sacred texts. And we have a debt of gratitude to you for preserving and capturing these stories. So thank you. And Wendy's going to say that you were turning to the service, right? And that, is there anything else to announce about Lee's visit? So Lee has graciously agreed to, after the service, to sign copies of books if you've brought them with you, if you've purchased them already. So that's a...
Thank you so much, Rabbi. Thank you, everyone, for listening. Thank you.
So we're going to turn towards the Selichot. The Selichot service, we've handed out Selichot booklets. Perhaps there aren't enough for everyone, so maybe some people can share. I invite my colleagues forward. Okay, that's fine.
me okay? Are we on?
Yeah.
Okay, let's settle in, everybody. We're going to now transition to the service. Thank you to Rabbi Ben Gideon and to Yaron for what was an impactful and a heart-wrenching and gut-wrenching book talk. And I have the task now of helping us to transition from the difficult themes of the book talk to the spiritual themes of this evening. And so I'll just say a word about what we're doing here on a spiritual level as people settle in, and then we'll turn it over to the cantors. Congregants of mine who are here know that, come on in everybody, that I like to tell a story around this time of year that we borrow from the Zen Buddhist tradition about two monks, a senior monk and a junior monk, who are traveling together. At one point, they come to a river with a really strong current, and they're preparing to cross the river when they see a young and beautiful woman who's also attempting to cross. And the young woman asks them if they could help her cross to the other side, and the two monks glance at each other because they've taken vows not to touch a woman. They're Shomer Negia monks, we say in our tradition. When suddenly, without a word, the older monk picks up the woman, carries her across the river, places her gently on the other side, and carries on with his journey. The younger monk is taken aback. He can't believe what he just witnessed. After joining his companion again, he's speechless. An hour passes without a word between them. 2 hours pass, then 3. Finally, the younger monk can't contain himself any longer, and he blurts out, "As monks, we're not permitted to touch a woman. How could you then carry that woman on your shoulders across that river?" And the older monk looks at him and says what we all need to remember as we come to Selichot. He says, "Brother, I set her down on the other side of the river. Why are you still carrying her?" We come together this evening on Selichot. It's our evening of forgiveness. It's our time when we're holding an entire year's worth of grudges and resentments and ill will and anger, you name it. We cling so tightly to these things as people. They take up a lot of space here in our minds. They take up a lot of space here in our hearts. And so the spiritual work that we undertake as we begin these prayers tonight, a big part of it anyway, is loosening some of that grip that we have on those grudges and resentments and that ill will, of easing ourselves towards something like forgiveness. If not for the benefit of the offending party, then at the very least for our own peace of mind, so that we can go into this year with a lightness of spirit and start in some way a fresh start. I know it's easier said than done. Nobody likes when rabbis talk about forgiveness. You don't know what they said to me, Rabbi. You don't know what they did to me. You don't know what I saw them do. How can I just let it go and cross the river? It's very true. Some have done things that are so reprehensible and so far down that wrong path that they don't deserve our forgiveness. With them, we can't just let it go. I get it. And you should remember, too, that in Jewish tradition, any forgiveness that we grant, any forgiveness at all, is predicated always on the offending party committing to changing their behavior and sticking to it. And if they don't earn that wholeness in the relationship and earn that forgiveness, then we can't grant it. But even still, how remarkable is it that if you think about the story of the Torah, really the story of our people, It is at its core, more than anything else, a story about a people who go astray again and again and again, and a God that takes us back again and again and again. The very words that we're going to chant tonight, El Rachum V'Chanun, gracious and compassionate God, you know when they were first uttered. Immediately after the golden calf story, our greatest breach of God's trust, our greatest breach of the covenant. And when we call out to that God tonight in just another minute, and in these holy days to come, using those words, El Rachum V'Chanun, we take a hard look, all of us, I hope you will, at the imperfections and all the parts of our own character that we need to improve on. If you can't find any tonight, you have not looked hard enough, I assure you. And we trust that God will be with us through these days, not only as a God of judgment, but as a source of strength to help us better ourselves and take us back again and again and again. And we perform, starting tonight, what is a superhuman act, a divine act, an act of God, by remembering that those who harmed us throughout the course of the year are imperfect, striving beings just like we are, and we try desperately to hold on to a little bit of that grace and compassion that God has for us and to extend it to them in kind. Take the work of tonight seriously. Tonight isn't a concert, guys. It's a spiritual opportunity. Who are you still carrying with negativity as you cross the river into the year to come? And will you be able to find the strength tonight and through these holidays to say what are the most important words in the English language, in addition to all the Hebrew words that we'll speak tonight, the most important words you can say during this season? I'm sorry. I forgive you. I love you. Let's move forward. Let's move forward together. Let's work on this as we begin the Selichot service now. Cantors.
Thank you. So, Selichot literally means forgiveness. We are getting involved in prayers for forgiveness. I think after hearing the talk tonight and also the words of Rabbi Dermer, it makes us think about October 7th, which is coming just in a few days. And as we look at Omer's face, I can't help, and I hope you can't help, but also think about asking forgiveness from him and all the other hostages who are still in those tunnels for, in some way, not doing enough. Not doing enough protesting, not doing enough asking, not doing enough, praying on their behalf. There's got to be more that we can do. So I'd like to suggest, with some indulgence, that we dedicate tonight's Selichot service to the hostages. I also would like to say that October 7th, if you remember last year, was on Simchat Torah. Tonight it comes closer to our Selichot evening and during the high holiday season. And we just hope and pray that Simchat Torah this year will actually be a reason to celebrate, and perhaps the hostages will be released between now and then, and we'll have a real Geulah, a real redemption for them and for all of Klal Yisrael. So we'll begin on page 2. I ask my colleagues to join me close to the bima, on the bima. Do a little rearranging. Okay. That's good. You can have this mic. No, that. It's not hooked up. Okay. יושבי ביתך עוד יהללוך סלה אשרי העם שככה לו אשרי העם שאדוני אלוהיו תהילה לדוד ארומימך אלי המלך ואברך שמך לעולם ועד בכל יום אברכך ועד שמך לעולם ועד גדול אדוני להודיע לבני עד גבורתם וחודתם מלכותם מלכותם הגבול העולמים תהילת אדוני ידבר פי ויברך כל בשר בשם קודשו לעולם ועד ואנחנו נברך יה ואנחנו נברך יה מעתה ויד עולם מעתה ויד עולם On page 6, we'll continue with the Kaddish. Please rise.
יתגדל ויתקדש שמי רבה בעולמה דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי וישתבח, ביתפאר, ביתרומם, ביתנשא, ביתהדר, ביתעלה, ביתהלל, שמדי קודשה, בריחו. ליהול אלה מן כל ברכת ושירתה אדוני צדקה ולנו בושת הפנים מה נתונן, מה נאמר, מה לדבר, מה נצטדק. נחפשה דרכינו ונחקורה, ונשוב אליך. כי ימינך פשוטה לקבל שובים, לא בחסד ולא במעשים באנו לפניך. כדלים וכרשים דפקנו דלתך, דלתך דפקנו רחום וחנון. נא תשיבנו ריקה מלפניך, מלפניך מלכנו ריקה אל תשיבנו, כי אתה שומע תפילה.
You may be seated. We continue on page 10. Chazan Soko will lead us Lechuna Ranana.
Lechuna Ranana Adonai Nariya Letzoyishenu Nekadma Fanav Betodah Bizemira Nariya lo Tzedek u'mishpat mechon kisecha Esed ve'emet yikademu fanecha Asher yachtav namtik sod bevet Elohim nalech beragesh Asher lo hayam nehu asahu ve'yabeshet yadav yatzaru Asher biado nefesh kol chai eruach kol besar
Haneshama והגוף פועלה חוסר המלאך הנשמה לך והגוף פועלה חוסר המלאך הנשמה לך והגוף חוסר המלאך הנשמה לך והגוף הולך חוסר המלאך הנשמה לך והגוף שלך חוסר חוסר המלאך הנשמה לך והגוף שלך אדוני יעשה למען שמך הנשמה לך והגוף לך
Atanu Hashimecha, Adonai Aseleman, Shemecha, Bavor Kavod Shimecha, Ki Elechanon Verachum Shemecha, Lemane Shimcha Adonai, Vesanachtan Aroneinu, Ki Ravehu, Selach Lanu Avinu, Ki Verovi Baltanu Shaginu, Mechalanu Malkeinu, Ki Rabu Avotoinu. Thank you, Scott. We're going to jump a couple of pages. Let's go to page 16 together. And Chazan Galer is going to lead us in El Erech HaPayim Atah, which leads us, of course, into the wonderful recitation of the 13 attributes of God, Adonai Adonai, and we'll ask you at that time to rise. If you rise now, it's fine, but usually we rise right before that.
Feel free to be an early riser. Is that D minor?
I like that, Larry. I didn't know you were so funny.
Elech HaPayim Atah, Uval Rachamim Nekreita, V'derech Teshuvah Horeita, Gdulat Rachamecha V'chasadecha, Tizkor Hayom V'chol Yom Lezera Yedidecha, Teifen Eleinu B'rachamim, Ki Atah Hu Ba'al Rachamim, B'tachanun uV'tfilah Panecha Nikadem, Kishodat Al-Yanav Mikadem, Mecharon Abcha Shuv, Kimo V'toratcha Katuv, U'v'tzel Kinafecha Nechasem Nitlonan, Ki Yam Vayered Adonai B'Yanon, Tavor al Pesha V'timche Asham, Ki Yacham Vayidyaseh V'Mosham, Tazin Shavotein V'takshiv Menu Mavar, Ki Yom Vayikra V'Shem Adonai V'Sham Ne'emar, Vayavor Adonai al panav Vayikra Adonai Adonai Erachu Lechanun Erech HaPayim Verachesed V'yemet Nose Chesed La'alafim Nose Avon V'Tesha V'Chata V'Lakeh V'Sanachta L'Avoneinu U'Chazateinu U'Chaltanu Slach Lanu Avinu Ki Chatanu Slach Lanu Avinu Ki Chashanu Yata Adonai Tov V'Salah Rav Chesed V'Rav Chesed Lechol Korecha
וסלחת לעווננו ולחטאתנו ונחלתנו.
Well, you can be seated for a minute if you'd like, but as we go to page 22, right? Page 22, we find another recitation of El Melech Yoshev, and the Hashem Hashem will ask you to rise at that point.
F minor.
Melech Yoshev al kisei rachamim mitnaheg b'chasidut mochel avon mochel avon amo ba'avir rishon rishon marbe mechila lechatayim uslicha lefoshim oseh tzedakot oseh tzedakot akol basar basar leruach lo cheratam timor lo cheratam אלוהינו ממש 13 זכור לנו היום ברית 13 כמו שנתניונה מקדם כמו שכתוב וירד אדוני בענן ויתייצב עמו שם ויקרא בשם אדוני ויעבור אדוני על פניו ויקרא אדוני אדוני אל רחום וחנון ערך אפיים ורב חסד ואמת נוצר חסד לענפים נושא עוון מפשע וחטא ונקה וסלחת על עווננו ונחלתנו נחלתנו סלח לנו אבינו כי חטא סלח נא לעוונם הזה כגודל חסדך וכאשר נשאת לעם הזה ממצרים בידינה ושם נאמר ויאמר אדוני סלחתי כדבריך. You may be seated.
Okay. The next part is called Adon Selichot. In Israel, this song is started already almost every day on the radio. It's like almost the anthem about the Selichot. It doesn't matter, Ashkenaz, Farad, it's very, very unique. And I really wanted to teach you a minute about it. It's very simple. Let's go like this. חטאנו לפניך רחם עלינו. Again. חטאנו לפניך
רחם עלינו.
אדון הסליחות בוחן לבבות גולה עמוקות דובר צדקות
חטאנו לפניך
רחם עלינו. אין חטאנו לפניך אדיר בנפלאות ותיק בנחמות זוכר ברית אבות חוקר כליות. תסבירו.
חטאנו לפניך רחם עלינו.
אין חטאנו לפניך
רחם עלינו.
טוב ומטיב לבריות יודע כל נסתרות כובש עוונות לא בצדקות חטאנו לפניך
רחם עלינו. חטאנו לפניך רחם.
מלא זכויות נורא תהילות סולח עוונות עונה בצרות
חטאנו לפניך רחם עלינו. חטאנו לפניך רחם עלינו.
פועל ישועות צופה עתידות קורא הדורות רוכב את הערבות שומע תפילות תמים ידע. Let's hear you.
חטאנו לפניך רחם עלינו.
חטאנו לפניך רחם עלינו. Thank you very much. It's very good audience.
Thank you, Yossi. And again, we'll have our turn to recite the 13 attributes once again, and you'll rise. Seems like you know when to do it, so. Chazan Scott.
Sure. El melech yosher כיסא רחמים מתנהג בחסידות אוכל הבנות עמו מביא ראשון מרבה מחילה לחטאים ולסליחה לפושעים עושה צדקות עם כל בשר ורוח לא חרתם תגמור אל הורית לנו לומר 13 זכור לנו היום ברית 13 כמו שהודעת לעיניו מקדם כמו שכתוב וירד אדוני בענן ויתייצב עמו שם ויקרא בשם אדוני ויעבור אדוני על פניו ויקרא אדוני
You may be seated for a moment. We are now turning to page 30 to one of the pinnacle recitations of the Selichot service, B'motzai Menucha, where it teaches us this is the right time to do this very special service, B'motzai Menucha, at the end of the Sabbath, right before Rosh Hashanah. And we come to you before, Kidamnucha Techila, we come to you before Rosh Hashanah. We are quick to come to God, to ask for Him to hat oznechami marom. Listen to us from up high. Lishmoa el harina ve'el hatfila. To listen to our song and to our supplications. Page 30. B'motzoi menucha, b'motzoi menucha, kidamnucha techila, kidamnucha, kidamnucha, kidamnucha techila, kidamnucha, kidamnucha, kidamnucha techila. Hatoznecha mimarom Yoshev tehila
אוזנך ממרום יושב תהילה לשמוע אל הרינה לשמוע אל הרינה ויל התפילה לשמוע אל הרינה לשמוע אל הרינה ויל התפילה לשמוע אל הרינה לשמוע הרינה ויל התפילה את ימינו זררה את ימינו זררה לעשות חיים בצדק נקד ונשארת גדעון נגיזו בזעקם בעוליים לשמוע לשמוע אל הרינה לשמוע אל הרינה ואל התפילה לשמוע אל הרינה לשמוע אל הרינה ואל התפילה דרושנה דורשך בדורשם פניך הידרשנה למו משמי מעונך ולשבת חינונם התעלם אוזנך ולשבת חינונם התעלם אוזנך לשמוע אל הרינה לשמוע אל הרינה ואל התפילה לשמוע אל הרינה לשמוע אל הרינה ואל התפילה זוחלים ורועדים מיום בואך חלים כמבקירם מעברת מסך תנופה ממכנה וידו פלאיך לשמוע אל הרינה ואל התפילה לשמוע אל הרינה ואל התפילה
We're going to go to the last stanza on page 32. רצי, רצי עתירתם, ביום אדם, ביום אדם, ביום אדם בלילות, שיהנה ברצון, כקורבן קנים ויולות. רמיסך עושה גדולות, עושה גדולות. רצי רצי עתירתם ביום אדם בלילות, 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 שיהנה ברצון כקורבן הכללי ביולות, רצי רצי עתירתם ביום אדם בלילות, שתהיינה ברצון כקורבן כליל ויולות, רצי רצי עתירתם ביום אדם בלילות, רצי רצי עתירתם ביום אדם בלילות, רצי רצי עתירתם ביום אדם בלילות, רצי רצי עתירתם ביום אדם בלילות. לשמוע, לשמוע, לשמוע אל הרינה, לשמוע אל הרינה ואל התפילה, לשמוע, לשמוע, לשמוע אל הרינה, לשמוע אל הרינה ואל התפילה, לשמוע אל הרינה, אל הרינה ואל התפילה, לשמוע אל הרינה, אל הרינה ואל התפילה, לשמוע אל הרינה ואל התפילה, לשמוע אל הרינה ואל התפילה, לשמוע אל הרינה ואל התפילה, לשמוע, לשמוע, לשמוע אל הרינה, לשמוע אל הרינה ואל התפילה, לשמוע, לשמוע, לשמוע אל הרינה, לשמוע אל הרינה ואל התפילה. One more time, we'll pray towards the 13 attributes of God. We'll ask you to rise, and you know when. On page 34.
אל מלך יושב על כיסא רחמים, מתנהג בחסידות, מוחל עוונות עמו, מביא ראשון ראשון, מרבה מחילה לחטאים וסליחה לפושעים, עושה צדקות עם כל בשר ורוח, לא חרתה תגמול הורית לנו אמר 13 זכור לנו ברית 13 כמו שהודעת לנו מקדם כמו שכתוב וירד אדוני בענן ויתעצב עמו שם ויקרא בשם אדוני אדוני
אדוני אל רחום וחנון ערך הבית ורחסן ואמת נוצר חסר לאלפים נושא ירון ופשע וחטא ונקה וסלחת לעווננו ולחטאתנו ולחטאנו סלח לנו אבינו כי חטאנו וחל לנו אבינו כי פשענו כי אתה רב חסד ורב חסד לכל קוראיך. Please remain standing. We go now to page 38, Shema Kolenu.
Shema Kolenu Adonai Eloheinu Chus Rachem Aleinu וקבל ברחמים וברצון את תפילתנו. השיבנו, השיבנו השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה חדש חדש ימינו
השיבנו אדוני אליך ונשובה חדש ימינו כקדם אל תשליכנו מלפונך ורוח חדשך אל תיקח ממנו
אל
תשליכנו, אל תשליכנו לעת זקנה, ככלות כוחנו אל תעזבנו.
אלוהינו, אלוהי אבותינו, תבוא לפניך נפילתנו, ויעתיתנו מבחינתנו, שיהננו הזפנים, או כשיורם, לומר לפניך, אדוני אלוהינו, ואלוהי אבותינו, צדיקים אנחנו ולא חטאנו, אבל אנחנו ואבותינו חטאנו. איי 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 אשמנו, בגדנו, גזלנו, דיברנו דופי, איי 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 הבינו והרשענו, זדנו, חמצנו, טפלנו שקר, איי 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 יעצנו רע, גזענו, לצנו, מרדנו, ניאצנו, שררנו, אבינו, פשענו, שררנו, קישינו עורף, איי 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 רשענו, שיחתנו, תבנו, תהינו, איתנו. סהרנו ממצוותיך ומשפטיך הטובים, ולא שב לנו, ואתה צדיק על כל הבא עלינו, כי אמת אתה עשית ואנחנו הרשענו. You may be seated.
Be flat. You want to introduce it? Just a couple words. Just be flat for the first two stanzas, C for the third stanza, for the rest of it. Mishiana, he who answered our father Abraham, his son Isaac, Jacob, Joseph, and on through our history. May he answer us. Mishiana, hu ya'anenu.
Mishiana le'Avram Avinu behar HaMoriah, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Yitzchak beno shenekad al gabei HaMizbeach, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Yaakov bebeit El, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Yosef bebeit Asurim, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Avoteinu al Yam Suf, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Moshe b'Chorev, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Yaron b'Machta, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Pinchas b'Kumo mitoch ha'edah, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Yoshua b'Gilgal, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Shmuel b'Mitzpah, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'David u'Shlomo v'no b'Yerushalayim, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Eliyahu behar HaKarmel, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Elisha b'Yericho, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Yona b'mei hadaga, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Chizkiyahu melech Yehuda b'chol yom, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Chananya, Mishael, Azariah b'toch kivshan ha'esh, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Daniel b'gov ha'arayot, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Mordechai v'Esther b'Shushan ha'birah, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'Ezra b'Gola, hu ya'anenu. Mishiana le'chol hatzadikim v'achasidim v'atmimim v'ha'yesharim, hu ya'anenu.
Thank you. We'll go now to page 48. On the first paragraph, we're only going to sing together the last 4 words, which have been built out to a beautiful Hasidic song, Hashta Ba'agala. Hashta Ba'agala, Ovizman Karim, Ovizman, Ovizman, Ovizman Karim. Hashta Ba'agala, Ovizman Karim, Ovizman, Ovizman, Ovizman Karim. Hashta, Hashta, Hashta Ba'agala, Ovizman, Ovizman, Ovizman Karim. Hashta, Hashta, Hashta Ba'agala, Ovizman, Ovizman, Ovizman Karim. Hashta Ba'agala, Ovizman ובזמן קריב השתם בגלה, ובזמן קריב, ובזמן קריב השתה בגלה, ובזמן קריב השתה בגלה, ובזמן קריב השתה בגלה, ובזמן קריב, ובזמן קריב השתה בגלה, ובזמן קריב, ובזמן קריב השתה בגלה, ובזמן קריב. Cha-cha-cha. And a little bit later in the page, we find Shomer Israel. Shomer, Shomer Yisrael, Shmor Sherit Yisrael. Shomer, Shomer Yisrael, Shmor Sherit Yisrael. V'yar Yovad, V'yar Yovad Yisrael, V'yar Yovad, V'yar Yovad Israel האומרים, שמע ישראל. שומר גוי אחד, שמור שארית עמך. שומר גוי אחד, שמור שארית עמך. ויעל יאהב גוי אחד, ויעל יאהב גוי אחד, המייחדים שמך אדוני אלוהינו אדוני אחד. שומר גוי קדוש, שמור שארית עם קדוש. שומר גוי קדוש, שמור שארית עם קדוש. ויעל יאהב גוי קדוש, ויעל יאהב גוי קדוש, עם שרשים לשלום קדושו לקדוש. Please rise. Let's join together. Avinu Malkeinu, Aneinu Vaneinu. Avinu Malkeinu, Chaneinu Vaneinu, Ki en banu maasim, aseh imanu. צדקה וחסד, עשה עמנו צדקה וחסד, והושיענו. אבינו מלכנו, חננו בנינו. אבינו מלכנו חנינו בנינו כי אין בנו מעשים עשה עמנו צדקה וחסד עשה עמנו צדקה וחסד והושיענו יתגדל ויתגדל שמי רבה ביעלמה דברה חירותי וימליך מלכותי בחייכון וביומכון ובחיי דכל בית ישראל איי בגלה ובזמן קריב ויאמרו ויאמרו אמן יהי שמי רבה מבורך לעולם עולם מימיה יתברך וישתבח ויתבהר ויתרומם ויתנשא ויתהדר ויתעלה ויתעלה שמי דקודשה ברכו לעילם עם כל ברכתה ושירתה תושבחתה ולחמתה דמירן ביעלמה תושבחתה ונחמתה ידע מירן ביעלמה ויאמרו אמן תתקבל צלותו ובאותו בכל בית ישראל קדם מבוא נבי שמעיה יאמרו ויאמרו ויאמרו אמן השלמה רבה משמעיה חיין עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו אמן עושה שלום במרומה יעשה שלום עלינו ועל כל ישראל ויאמרו We'll remain standing for one more song, which is the Yigdal. But before that, while you're already standing, let us sing the Hatikva. We do have the Israeli flag here, and you'd like to make an announcement?
Yeah, I think I'm supposed to do the closing.
Okay, we'll do the closing now. Go ahead. Here, come up here. Pull it down.
I just want to thank all the clergy for this inspiring evening. I'm very moved, and I think when I was reading the prayers in English, the Goy Kadosh, the guardian of the holy nation, protect the remnant of the holy people, let not the holy nation be destroyed. The proclaimers of Kadosh, Kadosh, Kadosh really spoke to me. And tonight we've been privileged to hear from Yaron, author of 10:7, 100 Human Stories, a work that captures the deep pain and humanity behind each loss from that tragic day. And the book reminds us of an essential truth. Only through confronting pain can we open our hearts to real change. In our tradition, the 100 blasts of the shofar on Yom Kippur calls us to hear, to feel, and to act. Each note is a cry for justice, for healing, and for hope, echoing the 100 voices Yaron has so powerfully preserved. Let this be our charge, to listen deeply, to empathize, to strive for a future where suffering is met with compassion and courage. One heart at a time, we can change the world. Lashana Tova.
פנימה נפש יהודי הומיה ורפאתי מזרח קדימה עין לציון צופיה עוד לא אבדה תקוותנו התקווה בת שנות 2000 להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון ירושלים להיות עם חופשי בארצנו ארץ ציון ירושלים.
If you'd like to follow along the Yigdal, it is found, many of you have the Shabbat Siddurim in your pews on page 53.
יגדל אלוהים חי וישתבח ממצב יהנת אל מציאותו אחד ואין יחיד כייחודו נראה וגם אין סולח אין לו דמות הגוף וינהגו לא נערוך אלא קדושתו קדמו לכל דבר אשר נברא ראשון וראשית לראשיתו הינו אדון עולם וכל נוצר יורה גדולתו ומלכותו שפע נבואתו נתנו אנשי סגולתו ותפארתו לא קם בישראל כמו שעוד נביא ומביע את אמונתו תורת אמונתם להמוער היה נביא עולם על ביתו לא יכל לפאר ולא יעמיד דתו לעולמים לזולתו צופה ויודע צאתנו מביט לסוף דבר בקרבתו גומר לאיש צדק כמפעלו נותן לרשע רק כרישתו ישלח בקץ ימין משיחנו לימדון מחכה קץ ישועתו מתים יחייל ברוח חדו ברוך עדי שם תהילתו מתים יחייל ברוח חסדו ברוך עדי שם תהילתו.
Thank you. And Happy New Year and Shana Tova to everyone.
למה לא? מה הוא לא אוהב? אתה הרב. How are you? How are you? Shana Tova. You and your family. Well done there, Chief. Thank you, sir. coming, I'm coming.